Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky. The Lakers have a new coach. He is JJ Redick. Yeah, that JJ Redick. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free. It is never, ever, ever behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers and fans. I was going to say fans of ours, and subscribers to the channel who are finally thrilled that the Lakers have done the thing that they've been waiting like 7 weeks to do, which is hire a replacement for Darvin Ham. It is JJ Redick, the man who was in front of the line when this whole process began, by every signal that was sent out as the Lakers began this process. And he finishes in the front of the line as well. So we'll break all this down. I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. It's hard to say, Andy, that you could be surprised by the news that came down on Thursday. But were you at all surprised at the news that came down Thursday?
I mean, I'm surprised the news came down Thursday in the sense of I wasn't 100% confident the news would ever come out. Other than 5 days of Hurley Gate, it has felt like the Lakers have been leaking and signaling and, I don't know, even test ballooning the idea that JJ Redick was going to be the coach of this organization. You don't float reminds us of Pat Riley. If you're not trying to get the base excited, you don't keep leaking the word infatuated unless this is something that, the organization is clearly up in front over. And let's be honest, like the idea that JJ Redick was the perceived front runner at the outset of this, before even interviewing, before even holding a clipboard for children definitively past puberty. No, this is not a surprise. My ramble ended. No, it's not a surprise.
It's one of these things where, I am glad that, because my biggest thing about Redick what I wanted them to do was get this done quickly, because if you're going to hire Redick, have the confidence to say, this is our guy. We know it's an unconventional hire. We think it's forward thinking. There was a stretch where, a whole raft of agents were hired to be GMs and basketball ops guys and stuff like that. In the beginning, oh my God, what are people thinking? This is, they're agents. They're not basketball executives. And some of them have found a great deal of success there. And, we've seen broadcasters do this and former players. And it's not, and there wasn't a candidate out there where you look at it and say, how on earth do you pass this guy up? This is one of these situations where the Lakers were going to have to kind of pick a horse out of a bunch that, where there was no secretariat, and if Redick was their guy, and obviously he was, what I really wanted them to do, and I want them to do from here, is empower him by getting this done quickly. The longer this dragged out, the less empowered Redick would be, whether that's to hire the best assistants from anywhere because guys get locked into contracts so they get hired somewhere else, or to just project real confidence in what you're doing. Because when you are doing something outside the box, Andy, it's really important to have that belief and show confidence in what you're doing and why, so that you can effectively answer the questions that people are going to ask, in this case around inexperience and all those other things. When you move quickly and definitively, you can quash a little bit of that, at least from the organization's perspective.
And it's interesting, too, as far as the idea of quashing any hedging would be too strong because they hired the guy. And
didn't really interview, other than, the Hurley-burly around Dan Hurley. There really wasn't.
James Borrego got a formal interview.
He did, but from that generated nothing. There was no. I'm just factual. I understand you're talking like factually, but I'm saying for all intents and purposes, the Lakers didn't open this process up to anyone other than the offer they made to Dan Hurley.
Right. Look, we've talked about this many times over the course of about 7 or so weeks. To some degree, this has felt very much like a charade, like the idea of trying to look like it has been an exhaustive, thought-provoking, intensive search where every single stone has been uncovered, because so many different times it has felt like they've been looking to take themselves where they wanted to go. Sometimes context changes. The Coach K informal, formal advisor piece of this in the beginning felt laughable because Coach K, as the advisor, as you seem really into JJ Redick, like this is kabuki theater. Then all of a sudden Dan Hurley's in there. Maybe it feels a little more legitimate. But as far as the idea of trying to subside any appearance of doubt, or to try to generate more appearance of commitment, I did find it interesting that JJ Redick only got a 4-year deal. I found that interesting. Because
4 years though, and reportedly about $8 million a year, which for a first-time head coach is
the money's fine. The money's fine.
No, but that's a pretty big contract for a guy. I mean, yes, it's only 4 years, but it's also pretty big money for a guy who's.
I understand that, but we have not found out yet if all 4 years are guaranteed, if there are any options, if it's a team option, things like that. But also, too, and this is what matters. You are correct that 4 years is pretty standard. There's nothing weird about 4 years. But if you're the Lakers and you go through coaches at an alarming rate, and you've been trying to signal the idea of looking for your forever coach, and you just offered Dan Hurley 6 years, I am surprised the Lakers. I guess surprised as far as signaling and as far as maybe wanting to put out that messaging that they didn't give longer than 4 years. I'm even more surprised, frankly, bordering on shocked, that JJ Redick did not insist on more than 4 years, especially when we find out if all four are guaranteed.
We'll talk about that after the break, because I actually disagree with you on this one. I think the contract terms for a guy who's never been an NBA coach before, or anything coach, are actually pretty strong for Redick. So we'll get to it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you versus the numbers. You pick more than or less than or two or more player stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Women's basketball is just getting started. Young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, veterans like Asia Wilson and Breanna Stewart win up to 100 times your money watching the ladies do their thing. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. You can make your picks, submit your entries in less than 60 seconds. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use that code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
So I don't want to argue too much over this, just because the what's next factor of it is more relevant. Although I guess the length of the contract and stuff is long term is what's next. I just think if it turns out 4 and 32, and I most time coaches aren't team options or coaching options inside, coaching contracts and stuff like that. I mean, generally speaking, the guys got a 4-year deal, and it's worth a lot of money. And the Lakers are on the hook if they fire him after a couple of years to be on the hook for 16 million more or something like that is a pretty significant commitment. So I mean, I think for a guy who had leverage but not all caps leverage, he ended up with a pretty good deal. I mean, a 5th year may be something that they would have liked, I'm sure. And who knows? Maybe the Lakers were initially inclined to give him 3 and they settled at 4. But like you say, 4 is pretty standard. It is it gives him enough runway that if the Lakers mean what they say about wanting to develop a program and do all these other things, that Redick will have time to get it done. But at the same time, if for some reason, Redick was all, hat and no cattle when it comes to just, great interview, great guy on the podcast, can break this stuff down, it just doesn't, is a failure in the mechanics of coaching, then you're not stuck. At least you're not stuck with like a 5, 6, or 7-year deal or something. I think it's pretty reasonable what they gave.
Under normal,
and I don't think it undercuts Redick to only have a 4-year deal. I don't think that undercuts him.
I think it does because of the Lakers' history with all this. For what it's worth, talking earlier today with a few other people, I'm not going to say they're sources or anything like this, but they are people that know the organization. Mm-hmm. They were surprised by the length of this too, for the exact same reason I was surprised. And it's very similar to how I feel about the Lakers' offer to Dan Hurley. Context free, it's a phenomenal offer. Reality, specific context included, there was no way in hell that was going to get it
right done. But the difference is
but
it's different. It's little apples and oranges.
No, not in terms of, again, the history of this organization now on its 7th coach since 2011, and having a history of saying that they're looking for their forever coach only to fire them within 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. If I'm JJ Redick and I've got an awesome gig that I don't need to walk away from, and I know I will get coaching offers down the line because I've already had coaching interviews, I would frankly not trust the Lakers with only 4 years.
Where you might trust a different team because the next contract offer you get would also probably be 4 years. I got you. Yes, that's fair. But I don't think it undercuts him. You may be talking about. I also don't think if it was a disaster after 2 years, I don't think a 5th year is going to keep the Lakers from firing him. I just, that's also the track record is they'll fire the guy either way. And the problem is you either buy into the Lakers being willing to do, being a supportive organization for you as a first-time coach, and being honest about what they're saying and capable of delivering on those things, or you don't. And if I'm him, if I need a 5th year to make me feel comfortable enough to do it, I don't take the job. I just don't take the job.
That's
because I don't believe in the organization.
That's also fair. I said a couple weeks ago, I'm not sure if I were JJ Redick, I would take the job. I'm just saying, were I him, I would require a 5th year. If for no other reason, then I would want to see them do their business differently, because there's been a track record of saying one thing and doing the exact opposite. But we're here now. It doesn't matter.
Right. And so, there is a lot on the agenda in terms of what all this means. And, it starts with, is this a good hire or not? And obviously the answer is, I don't know. I mean, we'll find out. I said it this afternoon when we did our emergency podcast, or Thursday afternoon when our emergency podcast, like, the risks here are obvious. He's never been a coach. This is a really hard job in a very difficult market with high expectations and a flawed roster with stars that are still elite but difficult to manage. Like, this is not a beginner's gig. And he is very obviously as beginner as you can be and still be remotely qualified for the job. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges, and the odds are probably that it's either he's going to be sort of a normal mediocre coach, or maybe he's not that good at it. Like, that's because that's how it is with most of these guys. But if you wanted to find, if you look at this field of coaches and say none of these guys really stick out and say, like, here's the surefire talent that we think is going to be, the somebody who's going to, become kind of an institution where you have to go hire that guy. If that's how you look at this field, and I, to some degree, agree with it. There are no sure things, certainly there. Redick is as good of a bet, I think, to succeed as anyone. He's obviously, really motivated, very regimented in what he does, very organized, has a very sophisticated basketball mind that has impressed LeBron James, who knows a thing or two about guys who know something about the game. Guarantee you, if LeBron was like, okay, don't let the podcast fool you, this is not somebody who should be the head coach of an NBA team, he's not hiring the next coach. I have a feeling he might have said something to Rob or Jeannie or Rich Paul to deliver that message or something, if he felt that Redick couldn't do this job. So, I mean, like, there is a lot of potential there. It's just a matter of timeline, at least to me.
Right. And again, I mean, I think that matters a ton. Like, the Lakers have to truly be dedicated to the idea of, we are not going to grade purely on results. And we are not going to
win and loss championships as the only measurement of results. Yeah. The results you're measuring need to be different.
Right. Like, you need to be grading on results in the sense of, does this guy seem like he is a good coach? Does he seem like he is growing? Does it seem like he has a plan that is clear and coherent, and he communicates it well, and he is growing as a coach?
As he maximizing the talent that's available to him.
As opposed to 7 seed, not good enough. Like, first round of the playoffs, not good enough. Like, if those are the standards that you operate from at top and then move downward, like, you get more granular the less you get more granular the less you prioritize things. Like, JJ Redick is going to be in trouble in the same way that a lot of other guys are going to be in trouble. As far as the idea of him being, good bet, risky bet, stupid bet, I don't think he's a stupid bet. I think he is a risky bet. I also see why he could be a good bet. There's a lot that is, I think, legitimately intriguing and impressive about JJ Redick, like you just mentioned. What I do think, though, is interesting about when you mentioned before that the field, other than, the credentials of Dan Hurley, there was nobody that feels like the obvious surefire, you have to get that guy. I don't disagree at all. But it does feel like the Lakers went through those candidates looking to be more impressed by JJ Redick, and in certain respects, more open-minded towards JJ Redick. And with that in mind, that process might have led to them missing somebody else. And I think that is at least worth noting, because it seems like they were very much looking for Redick, the diamond in the rough, in the way that it does not seem, at least, that they were looking for diamond in the rough qualities with either Micah Nori or David Adelman or Sam Cassell, which none of that means.
They needed a reason to not hire JJ Redick.
Right. And as opposed to needing a reason to hire the other guys. And I would argue that's not a great process. It doesn't make Redick a bad hire.
Right.
But it speaks to a lot of how they got here, and frankly, how they better be right. They better be right.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that will influence that, at least in the near term, is who exactly Redick can get to fill out his staff and what the roster looks like. And so big considerations there, how the Lakers approach these problems now that they have a coach. Get to it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast resource of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process, again, streamlined, simple. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring for a reason. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
It can be argued, and probably should be argued, that this thing the Lakers did today, while obviously very important, your coach is important, isn't actually the most important thing they're going to do this summer. The roster, Redick could be a very successful first-year coach, and if the roster doesn't improve, the Lakers still are not going to end up in the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals, or certainly not going to win a championship. So, this is, while a very consequential thing, it is still, at least in my mind, Andy, secondary to what the Lakers can do to give him the exact roster that is maximize the talent that fits exactly what Redick wants to do, and not make him have to adapt endlessly in his first year as a coach. They should try as much as humanly possible to tailor this roster to exactly what he wants philosophically.
You are totally correct. That's an interesting question, though, and like an interesting quest, just in the sense that nobody has a real idea of what he wants to do or how he'll execute it, other than the things he says during.
Right, he'd better have an idea. And no. Rating a guy, I was like, okay, we went and got you, you didn't use the people in the way that you said you wanted to use them after we got you and all that stuff.
No, I don't mean that. I don't think JJ Redick has a clear vision of what he wants to do. I imagine he has a very, very concise, detail-oriented version of what he wants to do. I mean, if you've learned anything from watching or listening to Mind the Game, and by the way, I'm going to start listening to back episodes now, just trying to get it more familiarized with, Redick speak, Redick thought, all of that stuff.
Well, this has been tremendous for traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm saying, though, is there's a difference between how somebody talks about this and how they go about implementing things in action, and how they communicate with their coaches, how they delegate the work of doing this sort of things, how they, delegate control of certain aspects of offense, defense, whatever. So finding the people that mesh with Redick, I think, is going to be interesting. It goes without saying he needs somebody on this staff with a lot of experience. I've seen Scott Brooks get named in several reports. I remember he came up a few weeks ago. I was like, please bring him in. He is the guy that jumps out at me as far as realistic gettable guys. Like, I've seen Stan Van Gundy come up. I could be wrong, but I don't get a sense from hearing him interviewed on Lebron and things like that, and also knowing the tragedy that he's dealt with recently with his wife taking her own life. I don't get a sense that he's looking to get back into that life. I could be wrong. Obviously, if he is, he'd be tremendous.
Sure,
but
I mean, his brother was just hired by the Clippers, so he might have a friend in town.
No, Scott Brooks, of names that I have heard with experience that feel realistic, he's the guy that I really would love to see them go after.
It's, you know, this idea of who is really important because like it gets down to like job delegation too, because, you know, what is Scott Brooks's specialty? Like, because, you know, they need guys to fill roles, and one of those roles is, you know, sort of mentor coach, a guy who can just sort of kick back, like not so much X's and O's, but really guide Redick in certain ways through the mechanics of being a coach, kind of peer around corners for him and shine light in places that he might not think to look because he's just never done the job before. And, you know, Scott Brooks in that sense would be wonderful for that. But you also need guys, you know, who really maximize their role. You know, are they the offensive coordinator? Are they the defensive coordinator? Does Redick want, where does Redick want his help? Does he want a guy who's considered sort of the offensive coach, or does he want to handle that himself? Like whatever it might be, like if the former head coaches they hire also need to be able to satisfy whatever sort of X's and O's or coordinator roles or all that kind of stuff that they're being asked to do. So it is sort of doubly complicated in that sense. And like, you want to surround him with, you know, all, you know, like-minded, innovative talent. If you hire Redick because you think he's an innovative young coach who's going to look at things a little bit differently and not be slavish to the conventional wisdom and not be afraid to think independently and all that kind of stuff, you want to find him assistant coaches who also fit that mold. Now, those guys might not be, you know, super, you know, have super long resumes either. So it's just that mix. Like, can you lure Sam Cassell? I don't know. But, you know, can you know, James Borrego, who would be, I think for some people at least, a pretty good like coordinator option. It's probably going to end up as a head coach in either Detroit or in Cleveland. So, you know, certain guys just aren't going to be on the board, but they really do need to maximize not just the, you know, the player development or the, you know, the good names or whatever, but guys with the right resume and the right skill sets, just like you're doing the same on the roster. You need to match that to the coaching staff as well.
Okay, here's now that I think about it.
I'm not saying Brooks can't do that, by the way, but I'm just, you know, in broadly.
No, well, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Scott Brooks, and I think he's, you know, among people out there about as accomplished of a coach as you can bring in to be alongside Redick. He's coached in the NBA Finals. He's, you know, managed a very good relationship with Russell Westbrook, which I don't mean as a shot at Russ, but Russ is not an easy guy to coach. And I think that speaks to Brooks's ability to work with people. But I would say one quality I would look for, and I don't even know who this person would be, but in the people you're looking to put on Redick's staff, somebody with experience devising schemes that get a big man the ball. And I say this because reading from this report from Shams and Jovan Buha and Sam Amick, quote, Redick, in talking about the interviews that he did, Redick explained his decision-making process when it comes to strategy, how the analysis and empirical evidence would always guide his choices rather than preconceived notions or outdated beliefs. Redick described a system molded around this roster, focusing on elevating Anthony Davis's involvement, particularly late in games, and alleviating the constant ball handling duties on James by utilizing him more off the ball. Later, it was said that, quote, after meeting with the Lakers on June 15th, Redick spoke on the phone with Davis on Monday. A critical relationship in the years to come, sources briefed on the situation said. The decision to choose Redick came as the Lakers, led by Pelinka, prioritized Davis's voice in the process and ensured that he understood the shared vision. That, to me, it also said there were other key players supportive in the hiring. But the Davis piece of this is very important because, as I've stressed on many occasions, he's actually the guy they should be prioritizing in terms of needs, in terms of wants, in terms of importance over LeBron. LeBron is LeBron. LeBron has the stature. LeBron is going to go down on the short list of guys that could be argued greatest player of all time. Anthony Davis, great as he is, will not. But Anthony Davis is still in his prime. LeBron is not. Anthony Davis is a two-way force, I would argue, that carries the biggest load of any player in the league when you take into account offensive and defensive responsibilities. LeBron is not. AD is likely, or at least hopefully, going to be here at least another 5 years. LeBron, I guess never say never, but probably doesn't feel likely. They should be prioritizing AD more. For what it's worth, that is something Rich Paul has even said.
Sure.
So again, all of this has to come in action and not just words and leaks and whatever, but look for somebody who knows how to get your big man the ball down the stretch of games. How about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you would think, first of all, you would think that Redick wrote some things on a whiteboard or a napkin that might indicate he's going to do that too. But again, that's meshing with, just as you need to find players who really mesh well with what Redick wants to do. And like over time, the guy is going to become, he might be a very flexible first-year head coach, but again, you don't see around every corner. You don't look in every shadow. You just don't know, because you don't know what you don't know until you do it. Just as they need to tailor initially things to as closely as possible to Redick's philosophy, strategic approach, whatever, so that he doesn't have to adjust as much in his first year. They need to do the same with the coaching staff and really align it with what he's looking for. So we'll see what direction they go there. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out, leave questions, leave comments, tell us what you think about JJ Redick. We will, if any big news, I guess, breaks over the weekend, we'll be there for it. But otherwise, we'll see everyone on Monday and continue breaking down all this stuff and continue, really start, I should say, to get everybody ready for the draft, which is something we can talk about now that the Lakers have a coach. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.